Welcome to this episode of our series on avoiding, preventing, and resolving family conflict, where the focus is on avoidance and prevention of conflict. In this episode, we focus on a foundational element of family, and that is marriage, where a man and a woman exchange vows at the marriage ceremony, which include, from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do us part. The marriage ceremony is joyous. These words may not sound of joy unless you celebrate the level of commitment that one spouse is making to the other. It takes a truly brave set of hearts to not just make this pledge, but to actually live out this commitment to one another. It is the highest level of commitment two human beings can make to each other, especially when along with these vows there is a commitment to have children, and the sacrifices which come with the bearing of children by the mother and raising the children to maturity by the couple as the future generation. So in this context, what does avoidance of conflict mean? That we will never disagree? No, that is outside most human relational capabilities. Avoidance in a family context means creating and engaging in the process to deal with disagreements so they do not lead to conflict, with conflict leading to even more conflict and culminating in dispute to the detriment of family, between spouses as well as across generational lines to children. If the cultural environment we live in provides freedom of choice about who we marry, we get an opportunity to discover, explore, and build a relationship with the person with whom we exchange these vows. At times, our personal process of choice and mutual agreement takes several relationships, or it could happen at first sight. Mindset is a critical component of our process, and elements of a mindset are seeded in us by our own parents, in particular during our early years. Children see and children do. Our experience as youngsters may result in a favorable or unfavorable disposition towards a lifelong union with family, with children, as a natural objective. Forming this mindset may also result from external sources, from others' families. Then there follows a process which in today's world means many models, hopefully one that works for both future husband and wife, carries over to children, and for better or worse, in sickness as well as in health, until death do us part. Wow. At what age is this model formed and undertaken? How mature are we when we enter into this mindset? And what is the social, cultural, and economic environment in which the two of us come from and live in? Will we be sufficiently independent so we can live a normal life in the case that something happens during our marriage? Or, if one is dependent on the other, is there clarity of the reality which this creates? And is that dependence entered into freely and clearly? In youth, the formative years, emotions can and do get so high that judgment goes down to where decision-making is impaired. And there is the physical, the sexual drives, to add to the opportunities as well as the challenges in forming a lifelong, lasting relationship with meaningful conflict avoidance. A survival factor in our humanity and it's a lifelong one, is self-interest, which pervades and challenges us during our entire lives. Entering into a marriage often requires compromise and sacrifice of self-interest, as well as acceptance of our partner's realities, which include their own self-interest. Being cognizant of self-interest and how it plays into a marriage partnership adds to conflict avoidance. It's basic, it's fundamental, an inherent part of our humanity. As in any human endeavor, what makes synergy possible is our unique ability and capability in communications. And when it comes to marriage, a lifelong commitment, an evolving and changing process, adaptability being key. Communications means listening, hearing, digesting, acknowledging, sharing, discussing, and a plethora of skills and techniques through which avoidance of conflict is successful. Setting aside one-on-one time and putting effort into dialogue, where it is okay to express feelings, where writing and exchanging notes are useful tools, followed by acknowledgement and discussion. No judgments about right or wrong is one way to avoid conflict. Importance must be given to expectations, expressed, understood, realized, and for a multitude of reasons and circumstances unmet, which can unleash a cascade of follow-up emotions and judgments. Expectations, looked at positively, require careful aforethought, management, reconciliation with reality, and with a positive attitude to accept that which we cannot change. Setting and living expectations is no easy task during any part of a family life cycle, from outset to end of a marriage, and for and with children who set and live towards their own scope of expectations, met and unmet. There are very few absolute expectations. One is, we will die, which is both a positive and negative expectation depending upon one's perspective. A positive perspective towards end of life is often a religious one. Life is a phase, a challenge to adhere to values and principles, which if successfully met will result in a heavenly and rewarding outcome. A negative one is, why do I have to die? I want to live forever here on this earth. Our spouse brings their own unique humanity to family. It is difficult enough, maybe impossible, to understand oneself. Understanding a lifelong spouse is, realizable to varying levels of degree, and as for children, the challenge is even greater and often most challenging over all of the ages of human existence. So, part of a process, a model, to avoid conflict about expectations lies in a commitment of respect, along with a lifelong striving to not only understand, but respond to issues and needs, where the desired outcome is to build something greater than oneself in a collaborative fashion. Future generations. So, the cornerstone of family starts when choice of a partner is made, accepted, and solemnized through marriage vows, followed by a honeymoon and a honeymoon period, the afterglow, living in mutual respect, harmony, conflict avoidance. Nonetheless, and despite best avoidance efforts, disagreement occurs, potential conflict looms. Attention is turned to prevention, that is, taking positive steps to keep disagreements from growing into conflict. Well, conflict prevention in the family environment is a process with a broad scope, ranging from taking no steps and hoping conflict will be averted because attention turns to other issues, or the disagreement is forgotten, or things work themselves out, to assertive steps to keep disagreements from growing into conflict. Take, for example, a couple who are renting a house and one spouse believes that money spent on rent is a waste when it could be used to start to build up equity in ownership of a house, while the other believes ownership is too great a risk, and over time it becomes clear there is disagreement on which path to pursue, with conflict rearing its ugly head. Conflict which will result in a disruption of family life and wounding the relationship. What positive steps can a couple take to prevent conflict in this disagreement about rent versus buy? One of the first steps is to recognize that a discussion about rent versus ownership requires a judgment based largely on economics, and to take care that emotions do not overcome good judgment. In a situation like this, facts are important, economic facts, something couples have faced in the past over centuries. This couple is not facing something totally new. They need to leverage lessons learned. There are numerous tools which help to organize and focus discussion, develop alternatives, and have a basis by which to exercise good judgment. So, as an example of self-help, a couple can turn to one or more calculators available on the internet to explore the economics as a means by which to gain an understanding of ownership versus rent based on data from their specific situation. There are more complex circumstances which challenge conflict prevention in families, which, through coping strategies like denial, sneak up on couples and involve complex values and principles which require different approaches to prevent conflict from turning into an avalanche to dispute. Take career choices, opportunities, challenges. Let's say a couple married young, while still deciding what careers they would pursue. Now, years later, one has decided to be a fire department person, while the other has finished medical school. For one, their firehouse is their second home, while for the other, medical school was financed with an obligation to do internships and residency in public health clinics remote from the family home. One is as passionate about their profession as the other, and they cannot agree on how to proceed. And there are additional complications: their circle of friends and socialization. One revolves around the firehouse, a very close, almost family-like group, while for the other, It revolves around fellow medical practitioners. One wants to vacation in a cabin at a remote lake, get away from it all, while the other wants to travel to exotic and exciting places. As you can see, a train wreck is in progress. Both were busy, did not notice the stress and the tension had been building, and yet for the sake of their mutual love and commitment, they both want to prevent conflict. Can they? And if so, how? What's in the toolbox of conflict prevention which can help? For some couples, accommodation comes without conflict. Sacrifices are readily made. The set of issues listed above are non-issue, and these couples find ways by which to go on with their lives in harmony. However, where this is not the case, there's an urgent need for conflict prevention. There's no one answer, but what follows is a sharing of thoughts. Perhaps the first thing to note is that in the conflict resolution field, it is in these types of circumstances where conflict avoidance gets a bad name. Because now that a couple has found itself where we outlined above, one of the worst things to do is to avoid facing the issues. They are not going away. And the longer they fester, the closer and more intense the conflict and dispute will become. Timing is critical. The crossroads are visible. However, this train is running out of control. There's a missing bridge. So the earlier the gap is identified and positive steps are taken, the more likely mutual problem solving will be undertaken, alternatives identified, and mutual agreement reached to forestall a burgeoning disagreement. Call it situational awareness. Our baseline as a couple has changed. There's a crossroad ahead, but between us and the crossroad there is a chasm. Conflict over values and principles, as well as information, facts, and data. Along the way, it is useful to continue, if not intensify, their dialogues about feelings with continued acknowledgement, no judgments made. There is no right, there is no wrong. Perhaps there are small steps, incremental ones, which can be taken to bridge the developing gap. The need for sacrifices were recognized and acknowledged at the outset of the relationship, and during the union, sacrifices surely have already been made. Leverage the lessons learned from those sacrifices, especially on how you came to a mutual agreement, and how can we apply the lessons learned in prevention of conflict into this situation. Do not underestimate complexity, uncertainty, and emotions which have been set in motion. Has the relationship already been damaged? And if so, what remedial steps can be taken by which to rebuild the relationship or to take it to a different plane? Has there been a shift in the balances of the relationship? And if so, what are they? Can the shift be accommodated through mutual agreement? An example is an income potential, social status, other considerations which can and do create emotional stress, anxiety, and resentment. Find ways to rebalance such differences, reach an equitable resolution, act in a spirit of fairness.